to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. I got to tell you something, people. This morning, I had to go get blood work done. I went to my doctor yesterday for a checkup, and I hate when I get blood work done. I hate it. I mean, I've had for my AFib, I've had 5 cardioversions and 2 cardiac ablations. I'm fine with that, but blood work, forget about it. So I'm going to go to the phlebotomist, and I want to take my mind off it. So I put my guest today's new album on, and I'm listening to it as I'm getting ready, and then I listen to it as I'm driving in the car, and it relaxed me. It was great. I really enjoyed it, and it took my mind off of what happened, which it was nothing. I don't look at them. But the album is called The First and Last Freedom, and my guest, he was on 6 years ago, and now he's back, is Martin Page. How you doing, Martin?
I'm doing well, my friend. I'm doing good. Yeah.
So tell me about the new album. I heard now when I talked to Diane, she said there's a great backstory. There's a great backstory. I want to hear the backstory to this album and where the title came from.
Well, the backstory is that I always knew that some people would be very nervous having blood work done. Yeah. And I thought if I could write an album that would help them, getting them into hospital, that would be what I would aim for. And I've done that over 6 years, Steve. I think and you telling me that means that I've achieved my goal. I hope your blood works good anyway.
So do I.
I'm sure it'll be okay. The story, which is, it is quite an emotional story, really, that started this record. I wasn't planning to do a record. 7 years ago, I was thinking of bringing a drummer across from England, Jimmy Copley, who played with me on my first album, In the House of Stone and Light. And I thought, well, at our age, let's just bring back the rhythm section. He's a great drummer. I'm a bass player. I reached out to him and he said, yeah, I'm up for it. Let's do that. And it was purely, Steve, to bring musicians together and just play in the later years of our career. And then I learned that he had leukemia. But we still thought he was going to make it. So we made plans to bring him over. But as the days went on and he was communicating with me, it was getting darker and he wasn't pulling out of it. He was in hospital. And his girlfriend said, if you could write a couple of tracks to get him out of hospital to rehearse, it would be great. Because he felt like playing on the In the House of Stone and Light record was a very, very special record for him. So I thought, no big deal, that would be great. I wrote 4 tracks, purely demos, just rhythmically, to get him to hear these tracks and to encourage him. And they did their job. They got him out of hospital. And I was writing just songs for him to play on, knowing he was a rhythmic, funky drummer. And then, unfortunately, the bone marrow transfer he had didn't work, and he never made it. But these 4 songs, at the same time as I was writing those songs, Jack Hughes came into town, the guitarist I'd worked with a great deal, and he just lost his wife from cancer. So I said, Jack, come into my house. I've got these demos. Let's just play. And when Jack came over, he said, these are the greatest work you've done for a long time. And it was really to make the story a little bit shorter, these tracks were written to help my friends go through grief and to heal. And around that time, all the players that played on the In the House of Stone and Light record miraculously started to appear around me. So I realized that there was something going on. And everybody was telling me these first 4 songs are pretty special. And so I was encouraged to write some more songs. Still thinking that Jimmy Copley may have come across, but unfortunately we lost him after I was about 6 songs in. And I moved in with finishing the record with Trevor Thornton, another drummer of mine. But the whole record started from that place and finished in that place, Steve, of trying to just write songs to bring my mates together so that we could jam and use music as medicine.
Well, now you said you wanted him to get the jazzy play. So I got to ask you, is Black Sun one of the songs you wrote for him? Because that's somewhat upbeat. And I was sitting there because it is, as I said, it's a very relaxing album. And that's a good thing. You know, when I was sitting there driving, and you can listen to it. It's one of those things, you know, I can have a glass of wine, chill out, listen to it. But then you have Black Sun, which is sort of more upbeat, and there's a few other ones. So what are the 4 songs you wrote for this Jimmy?
Yeah. Well, actually, those weren't the 4 songs that I wrote for Jimmy when I started. My studio here had broken down, and I was in my office, and I was just making some very raw demos for him. And it was Courage, the first track on the record. In fact, Abraham, although it wasn't rhythmic, I believed it was a song that would feel very spiritual to him. A song called Fade, and a song called Breathe in My Heart. But then still thinking that he might be working with us after the album developed, I did write Black Sun, thinking he's going to kill this when he gets on top of it. A couple of songs, Little Bird and Simplicity, have R&B flavor and reggae flavor. So I was always thinking, Steve, that he was going to be involved in the project. It was only till probably I was 7 songs in a writing that I knew he wasn't going to make it. And the key to the spirit of the record is when he was in hospital and he had a day to live, he was going to call all the musicians that he'd worked with, Jeff Beck, myself, and Paul Rogers. And the nurses in England said, get ready, he's going to give you a call. And so I was driving back real late over Mulholland Drive here from my manager's office, and I get a call from London, and it's him in hospital. They've given him some morphine to get him through it. And he just said to me, I'm calling everybody that I love that brought music together. And I want to tell you I love you, and that music is what is so special about all our relationships. I'm okay. Get on and do the record. He was very tired, and he said, I'm ready to let go. It's just too much pain. But he just wanted to impart to me that music was built of love, and that he'd met some great people that way. And I mean, it just, I had to stop, get out the car, stare at the night sky, and I was very affected by his openness and his bravery. So in a way, I wanted to make the First and Last Freedom an album that had the tonal quality of hearing somebody speak to you in a very, very real and emotional way. And his spirit runs through the whole record, and all the players were aware of what we were doing. And although there's only one song on the album really dedicated to him, called Your Whole Heart, because in that moment he spoke to me, I could see the real truth of his being. The whole record is permeated with a feeling of, I suppose, his spirit. We wanted to do something really, really good. Getting back to the idea of my title, The First and Last Freedom, that's not so much a long answer. The first freedom in my life was music as a child, and I'm pretty sure my last freedom will be music.
You know, it's amazing that you bring up the Abraham, because when I listened to it, I got a very religious tone off it. It has just that, and I'm not a religious person. I mean, you know, my wife goes, she's Catholic, she goes to church. I was born Presbyterian. I don't really go to church. I have my beliefs, but when I listened to it, it's one of those spiritual songs, and it does sound religious, and it's funny because you said that, because it has that sound. Now, who is Abraham?
Well, this, as most of my songs appear, they come out of a phonetic vocal, and this song just fell out of me. I'm not a religious person either, but I was reading the speeches of Abraham Lincoln, and I just felt like his oration and his poetry and his motivating force in his words were so inspiring. And I'm thinking, that really touched me. And Martin Luther King's speeches. Of course, Abraham is a religious figure, and a patriarch for like 3 religions. So I knew that was an overbearing thing as well. But my main way I wrote the song, and you can hear it in the lyrics, it's like, one day your words will touch us again. Because, with social media now, you just got people attacking each other, and it's just outrageously like, how many people can we upset, and let's be cheap and nasty. And then when you sit down and you see what Abraham Lincoln was doing in a time of crisis, his oration was motivating and spiritual. And so that's really where the song came from. As a boy in England, Christian background, I'm not religious as such, but Abraham, that always resonated with me as a calling card to an overall sense of spiritual nature. But really, the song is written about saying that one day, hopefully, we'll be able to look at great oration, great poetry, great motivation of what words can do. That's really where Abraham came from.
Now, Courage, it starts with a little snippet, and then you go into the second Courage, and it's, you don't put part 1 and part 2, but what was the mindset behind that? Because I always think, I grew up with the album generation, so it's important how you bring the tracks, and the tracks are hear are good. Because I said you get sort of jumpier one in between, but it's usually like 2-2-1, 2-2-1, and it's good. I like that. But now with Courage, I saw it at first, and you know how you look at it, you go, is this a typo? Like, wait a second, there's you know, but so what was your thinking behind doing that? Because the first one's very quick, and then you go into the song. So
yeah, well, it's like you're saying. It's I grew up in the 70s, 60s, 70s when albums were really important, and you lived with them like a good book. Now, Jack Hughes, who I know you've spoken to a number of times, he was playing guitar here on the record. As I said, he'd come into town, and I wanted to bring him across because he was going through some grief. And he was rehearsing Courage, the actual track. And then he was working out his inversions, and he was practicing. And my manager just said, listen to how he's playing this. It's really beautiful. He's playing different inversions to the song. And so we just pushed the record button, and it's Jack learning the track, and he's playing some beautiful inversions. And I just tapped the engineer on the back of the shoulder and said, let's record him now. And then, you know, again, but lucky by having my manager in the studio and some other people saying, are you listening? And I'm like, no, I'm concentrating on other things. And Jack is there just going through his process. And then I decided to put some emotional keyboards very much in the background, like John Hopkins, like a drone. And it just felt very, very real. I mean, there's no effects. And we thought, let's make that the intro. It's not even the tempo of the song. But you know, for me, like you, I see albums as paintings. And so I'm always into thinking we're on a progressive track here. You know, we're on a story. Sequencing to me on albums is a lost art. And I think you just mentioned there, Steve, I was pleased to hear that you felt the running order and the way the album moved worked. But really, that's just Jack learning the song, and it turned into, I think, a 40-second intro that we thought, let's stick that on the front. But of course, I could have joined it to the main song, but I just think it's not the main song. It's a harmonic chordal sense of what's about to come.
Yeah, it's sort of like, you know, going back to like some of the early hair metal, Van Halen, you know, Eruption, before You Really Got Me. It doesn't, you think of them as part together, but it's not. And that's what you're right. That's how an album gets sequenced. Now, do you know Jack from his Wang Chung days? Did you know him before that? How do you know Jack? 'Cause I know Jack has been on a few of your albums, but how do you know Jack?
Yeah. So, you know, Jack just wrote to me about an hour ago saying he's coming into town to play with Paul Young and John Waite, and I've worked with those two guys as well. So I'm going to see all the people I worked with at the Hollywood Bowl. I was a fan of Jack when they were Hang Chung. And he had a song called Tina Na when I was doing the Q-Phil record back in London in the 80s. So I was very affected by Jack Hughes' first rendition of Wang Chung, which was Hung Chung, on Arista Records. And when I had We Built This City as a hit here in LA, he had Everybody Have Fun Tonight as a hit. And we were both voted as writing the worst songs in mankind's history. And so we felt, we too are top of the charts of the most disgusting songs ever written in time. And so, but I was a great fan of Jack, so I wanted to write with him. And he wanted to write with me. He'd heard We Built This City, and he was about to do another Wang Chung record. So in the 80s, we sat down and wrote about 4 or 5 tracks together, and he was going to do a solo record. We became really, really close. We're always writing to each other, telling each other what books to read and what to study and what classical music to listen to. So he's like a harmonic brother to me and a historical brother. We didn't grow up together, but we came through a lot of things together, the 80s, and having 2 hits that are voted the universe's worst songs of all time. You shouldn't be laughing at that. It offends me. It really offends me. Get back off.
No, you know, it's funny though. That song, you know, We Built This City, it is the 80s though. And that's what, you know, it's one of those songs that you see, like a lot of people think, you know, Don't You Forget About Me. But that was something, because it's Breakfast Club. But that song, you know, people can bitch about it, but you know what? I'm sure, as my mom would always say, you're crying, you're laughing all the way to the bank. I mean, that's one of those songs that, but if you say that, everybody knows that song. There's certain songs that everybody knows. No, I'm incredibly proud of We Built This City. It was the first song I wrote
second song I wrote with Bernie Taupin, Elton's lyricist. We'd written These Dreams just before that. No, actually, We Built the City was first, sorry. No, I wrote These Dreams first, but We Built the City was the first hit. I'm beginning to forget now. But yeah, the demo of We Built the City is very 80s. It's very Tom Dolby. And Bernie Taupin loved the original demo, which people can hear out there as much more raw and a bit Blade Runner and dark and funky. But no, I'm incredibly... I mean, I wouldn't be making these solo records or having my studio here if We Built the City hadn't been such an iconic song. Even now, it's in so many movies, so many adverts. It has a life of its own. And if I meet new people and I'm trying to be a friend to them, they say, so what do you do? I say, I write songs. And they go, yeah, anything I've heard. And I go, we built this city on rock. And I've got friends, neighbours. The gardener knows who it is. You know what I mean? So it's a strange feeling when you've written a song that everybody seems to know. I mean, the Beatles and Elton, they have that forever, but I can, even those conversations you bring up, like We Built This City, and it's a calling card for me.
Now, what is it like, though, for a writer? Because, I mean, you've written so many great songs, and you've written for a lot of people, but when you see I've always wondered, when you see your song on a commercial and they change the lyric, I mean, is it flattering to you, or is it something that you're like, okay, we understand why they're using it because people will recognize it. But as a writer, because as you said, you and Jack talk about classical music and this, does it ever like piss you off a little bit, or does it something that you're just going, hey, there's a check? I mean, I always wonder because as you said, the beginning when you wrote it, it was more gritty, and you wrote it with Bernie Taupin, which I mean, no one's going to complain about writing with one of the best songwriters ever. But so, what is it like for you as an artist and a writer when you see it on a commercial?
I think that's a good question. Mainly when it's the lyrics they change, and they very rarely change the music, which is really my side of the picture. The publishers will ask Bernie Taupin if he's happy with that, and he seems to be quite easygoing with it. I mean, it wasn't. I think it was now must be about 9 years ago, where We Built the City became the Christmas #1 song in England, which is a big deal to have the #1, and it was done by Lad Baby, who's a rapper. And it was called We Built This City on Sausage Rolls. And I thought, I wonder how Bernie feels about that. And he said, I like sausage rolls. They're okay. And it was made for charity. So I think both of us, even when they ask me, because I have to go on it as well, and King of Wishful Thinking, Go West gets used a lot. When they want to change the lyrics, I think we just make sure that they're not saying anything that is dark, insulting, and has an unpositive vibe about it. So, but Bernie, sometimes I think Bernie may turn it down. I wonder. But he's like, no, sausage rolls, they're okay. Let's go forward. It is a strange thing, but they don't really change the music. And when I work with Bernie, I'm doing all the music. So my side of it is sort of respected to a certain degree. But but as you know, with a title like We Built the City, every sports team in the world is going to say, we built this team on this. It's the perfect title for everybody's, to use it. It's down to that title. And as you say, I've only got to mention it to anybody. We built, and they'll finish it for you. We built this city, So it's an iconic song. I never dreamt in my life. It was the first song I wrote with Bernie. I never dreamt in my life I'd only just come into LA, and I did the demo on an 8-track, and I just wanted to thrill Bernie Taupin with the song. I just wanted to do a good demo because I respected Elton and Bernie so much. So I was only thinking about, I want Bernie to realize he's writing with somebody who's a kid and is doing new wave music, So it's like Tom Dolby, Thompson Twins, Ultravox. It was when music was changing, and he wasn't with Elton at that time. They sort of fractured. So to see it become the monster it is it's a strange feeling. It's like, I know that Paul McCartney must have that with hundreds of songs, Penny Lane and Yesterday, but in some kind of way, We Built the City has become the iconic song of the 80s. They're even talking about it, being awarded an award for being the 80s video, the 80s song, because you sort of, when you hear We Built the City, it gets a lot of crap, everybody going like, it's a worst song. It's just because, it was a big smash. It was a huge, huge, huge song, and people like to hit songs, and they always are fascinated by the lyric. You know, Marconi plays the Mamba. You have, even now, if I go on the internet, there's like hours and hours of people saying, Marconi played the Mamba. That means it's playing a flute. Or, no, it's a snake. It's a dance. It's Marconi did the radio station. I mean, and so it's like, I could write a book called Marconi Played the Mamba, and it would sell, I think. It would sell.
Now, how did you end up working with Bernie? Because once again, the guy's a legend, and you said you were a young guy, you came to L.A. How did you meet him? I mean, because you always wonder, you know, people meet, there's, as I say, strange bedfellows. People meet all different kinds of people. I met through this show and through the business community. I meet all different kinds of people, and I go, how did I meet this person? So how did you end up working with Bernie? And second part of that, were you a little bit intimidated because he is a legend, and Elton John had so many hits?
Yeah, it was the 80s. I'd come into LA with a band called Q-Phil. We had a song called Dancing in Heaven, which was a dance techno song. K-Rock were playing the hell out of it. It was a Los Angeles hit. And so my partner and myself in the band, Brian Fairweather, we were going to all the publishers and all the record companies and just playing other songs. And we could get into these meetings because we were on the radio we were like, you know, New Order were in town, or Thompson Twins were in town. So people were opening our doors to us because music was changing. And Bob Scoro, a guy at Chapel Records, said, I need to put you with Bernie Taupin. Do you know who he is? And I'm like, yeah, I grew up on Goodbye Electric Road and Tumbleweed Connection. So I was thrilled. And he thought that I should write with Bernie, because they were saying that Bernie isn't motivated, that he isn't doing too much, and he's just lazing around the pool. So they sent the Q-Phil record, our album, to Bernie, and I didn't think he would get it at all. You know, I mean, it's very, very club-oriented. But he came back and said, I'll give the kid a chance. And that's when he didn't meet me, he just sent 2 lyrics to the publisher to give to me as a tester. And that was We Built This City and These Dreams, but These Dreams was called Boys in the Mist. I did change the lyrics around. And those were the first 2 lyrics that he gave me. And when I made the demo of We Built This City and sent a cassette to Bernie, I was intimidated. I wanted to prove to Bernie that I was worthwhile. I mean, Elton was a huge influence on me, and I was doing a different kind of music. I don't think Elton would have written We Built This City. I don't think it's his kind of thing. So Bernie was just turned on that we were doing that his music sounded different. But I was intimidated in the way that I thought I'm writing with somebody, even though I'm not in the same room, because Bernie he just gives you lyrics up front. I just wanted to win the day. I wanted Bernie to go like, wow, this is unusual. Now, if you think about it, Steve, it's not A Candle in the Wind or Goodbye or Rocket Man. So, you know, he had to be brave to listen to We Built the City. The demo is very Shock the Monkey by Peter Gabriel. It's very you know, and that was different. And he was brave enough to say, I like this. And then we met up. We went there. His manager took me to a restaurant, and we met up, and we were laughing all the time. Great. It was humor that brought us together. And I was a huge fan, so I was able to say to Bernie, you know, I'm in awe. It's great to be sat here with you. I've loved everything you've done. I grew up a massive record junkie, so I knew everything about Elton and Bernie's lyrics. I was always a fan. So I was able to talk to Bernie on what he'd done, and he liked my character, you know, and he knew I was a workhorse. I was determined. But we wrote, I think, about a good 150 songs together during a very short period. You know, it was interesting to see Bernie's biography come out, because he was saying, you know, we only wrote a few songs together. We wish we'd written more, because it worked well, you know. And I produced him on his solo record, and Elton came and sang on that. So it was lovely to meet Elton and to see Bernie in that situation. They were my idols. And I mean, we had those 2 number ones, These Dreams and We Built the City, within a period of 6 months. So it was a bit like scary. It was like Bernie was like, wow, let's keep writing with this kid, you know, off we go. And I mean, Elton was very upset. It was like, you know, who is that guy you're working with, you know? So a thrilling time for me. And in fact, I've just written with Bernie again after all these years. We've just written 2 more really outstanding songs together. As soon as his book came out, I contacted him and said, are there any leftovers for the record you're writing with Elton? And he said, yeah, I've got a couple. I'll send them over. So, I mean, I think he writes like 25 songs for Elton, and the ones that don't get used, I say, send them to me.
Now,
I'll take the scraps.
Now you had said something when you moved to LA. You said that the change in the 80s music was changing. Like you said, Ultravox, which actually I just saw Midge in Philly a few weeks ago. What was that like? What do you think? Why was there a change? Because 80s people. I went to college. I graduated high school in '82. I graduated college in '86. So, and that was my music. And it was, as a music listener, it was so great because you had new wave, MTV. We saw all these bands from England that we never knew who they were. But then we had the hair metal. Then we had the rap. So we had a lot of different influences and a lot of different songs. And when did you notice that that song was, the 80s was going to, like you said, Midge and Ultravox and New Order? What was that like being part of that? Because it's a part of, it's a part of a very important time in 80s music.
Yeah. I think it's technology, really, Steve. It's technology. I was in London, signed to Jive Records, and we put a single out, which was a bit like Elvis Costello. It was like ska reggae. But I was very in tune, and this is my band. And I thought, suddenly out came Midge with All Stood Still, Ultravox. And I just was knocked out about how unusual Vienna was and this whole Ultravox thing. And then there was a movement. I'd have to say it was the technology that changed everything, because you'll hear Phil Collins on In the Air Tonight. You're hearing a drum machine. So you're hearing drum machines. You're hearing bands like Soft Cell get smaller. Two guys are working together, and it's all electric, and it's almost emotional ambient music. And you didn't have to be a great singer. You just had to get the spirit across. And this was all happening in London around 79 and 80. And I decided, because with my band, we had one more chance to make a record, that we should drop the ska and the Elvis Costello thing and move away from that slight punk thing. And let's get involved with this new technology, which was synthesizers. And so Dancing in Heaven, our track that broke in Los Angeles, I think if you play Ultravox's All Stood Still, you'll hear where I was getting my influence from. And Tom Dolby had put out a record at that time called The Golden Age of Wireless, and I was just knocked out by that. I just thought that record, with Blinded by Science, was fantastic. Now, America was not in front of this. We were coming from England, as you know, and MTV was exploding it. So when I arrived in LA in '82, every record company, every publisher, because we were on the radio, wanted to meet with these two English guys who understood Fairlights, understood synthesizers. It was, but getting back to your question, to me, it's that music is always following how technology in the studios changes things. Say Frank Sinatra, an orchestra with one microphone, but that microphone is making that music become that way. Suddenly in a studio, you're getting more than 8 tracks and 4 tracks. You're on to 24 tracks. And there's the Fairlight sequencer, so you can sample sounds. So I think technology made the 80s music. You found people in their bedrooms, like they do now with Pro Tools, but you had kids in there with their Casio keyboards making 4-track or 8-track demos. And it came from Europe and Germany. A lot of the 80s bands were influenced by the German krautrock bands, which, so you're talking about Faust, and you're talking about experimental music like Cluster, and you'd find Bowie and Eno were, in Berlin, sort of playing with these Germans that were doing industrial music, So again, though, the simple answer to me is that technology changed. Guitars moved to the background, horns moved to the background, and synthesizers came forward. AMSs, digital delays, and it allowed for some unusual music to be made, like Dare by the Human League, and Joy Division. It gave the kid a chance. The kid fell in love with synthesizers and not guitars, and that's how the 80s, to me, has had that movement.
Now, what was it like when you moved, when you were in LA? Because I lived in LA I lived in Burbank for 18 years, and it was, as I grew up, near Philadelphia, and I lived outside New York, and it was still something, it was fascinating. As I always say, when I moved back east, in LA, like if I go to a bar or a restaurant and someone looks like a celebrity, It's not. But if you go to LA and someone looks like a celebrity, it is. You go to a bar and, someone goes, hey, that looks like such and such. Like, that is such and such. But so what was it like for you moving from England? You had, as you said, K-Rock was playing you. You had some juice because you had a song on the radio. What was it like for a young guy from England? Was it your first time to the States and then you moved to LA? Okay.
No, I'd been to America many times before because my father was working for British Aerospace, and they had the Harrier jump jet being tested in America. So as a kid, every now and then I would come across, but I'd be in the South, where my dad was with the Army and with the Marines and with NASA. So I was doing these holidays across because my father was working in America. And I got a sense when I was young, this is before I was really playing bass, of Southern music. So I was into the funk. That led me to playing bass. I was hearing Wilson Pickett, James Brown, a lot of black music. But when I came to LA in the 80s, we'd made Dancing in Heaven in London. And I knew that Los Angeles was the music center of the world. So I was determined, because it wasn't just Dancing in Heaven. I was a songwriter as well. And I had songs that sounded like the Doobie Brothers, sounded like the Pointers, and ballads like Toto. So even though I had my band, which was like, techno, behind the scenes, I was writing songs that I thought American artists should do. And of course, in that period, not the same now, but every artist in LA was using songwriters' songs. LA was magic to me, absolute magic. I came into LA and I was pretty soon working with Ray Parker Jr. on Ghostbusters because my manager was working with Ray Parker. I was on Ghostbusters one day and it was #1 in about 4 weeks. I couldn't believe how America was so open, vibey. Sunshine was out. I'd get my manager's car and drive it to the complex and I'd work with Earth, Wind and Fire. And our music, which we'd play to Earth, Wind and Fire and Ray Parker, excited these veteran musicians and so that time in LA to me was just pure magic. I still get a shiver when I think about it because I was breaking through and I was in Sunshine City and everybody I loved, Earth, Wind and Fire, Toto, Buskaggs, that was my music. I was a musician, so I appreciated great American playing. So yeah, those years for me in LA are fairy tale to me. I still talk about it to Brian because we're still working together after all these years, the guy from Q-Film. And we both talk about it like we just landed in Disneyland, and every time we played the song to somebody, they said, we'll record it now, instantly. It was like, how is this happening? We went in to see Gary Gershon Geffen at EMI Records, and he gets Kim Carnes on the phone and plays 2 of our demos to her while she's in Hawaii. And he puts us on the phone and she goes, I'm going to record those songs in a week's time. And I want to meet you English guys. You're like Squeeze. And we're like, this is fantastic. We're sort of doing this kind of stuff. Like, are you dreaming or am I dreaming? So we came at the right time. And the Americans, musicians and record companies were really primed for us. And of course, just like you, humor and being, so excited about working with these musicians, our characters allowed us to stay in the studios. But it was magic, sunshine. Brilliant. I love LA. Now,
what made you pick up the bass? I mean, because you sit there, you're a young guy. Your father's in the, working one of the furthest things you can go from music. He's, so what made, what, I mean, I knew you loved music, but, I love music, but I never picked up an instrument because I did once and I sucked. So I never picked it up again. But what made you pick up the bass?
I was down south with my father in the American air bases around Savannah, Paris Island, and Charleston. And I was bored, and I was really, I was missing my friends in England. And I put on the midnight special, Don Krishna's rock concert on TV, and I would just see these bands. And I remember one night watching Steely Dan play Reeling in the Years. And I'm led on the carpet there going, I could do that. That looks easy. And you can wear what you want. The girls love you. Put jeans on. And the bass player was tall. And I thought, and I like the undercurrent sound of bass. When I was a kid, I'd go to the top ranked suite at 15 years old in Southampton and dance to reggae and black music. And so to me, I always heard in my ear the undercurrent of rhythm. I'm a rhythmic writer. And so when I was in South Carolina, I got my dad to speak to a Marine at an airbase and say, ask him if any of your mates, any of these pilots play bass guitar. Of course, every American plays an instrument better than any Englishman ever can. It's like, a Marine has got a bass Fender and he says, yeah, let your son play it. So I started to practice with nothing else to do. I was missing my friends. I wasn't at school. I wasn't at college. And I started to practice and buy the books that teach you scales. And I play along with records. And I just felt, I can do this. I don't know if you've ever felt it in your life, but it's like, if you pick up a tennis racket, a tennis player go, I can do this. And so I instantly knew when I started to play bass really early on, like I can feel this, I can do this. And then at that time as well, 70s, you've got on TV the Brothers Johnson, Sly and the Family Stone, Stanley Clarke. You've got great bass players, and bass became important. Verdine White with Earth, Wind and Fire, Bootsy Collins, Parliament. And it's on TV. We don't see it these days. And so I was like, this is what I want to do, but be a bass player. It is the heart. And when I jumping around again, when I was young, I was a soccer player and I was a centre half. So I was a big guy at the back or up the front as a striker. And I saw that the same as playing a bass, that you're the fundamental support of the team, and everything harmonically starts from you. And I just fell in love with it. And it's one of those things in my life. I go to sleep with the guitar by my bed and I'd look at it and think that is so beautiful. And I want to live with that. I want to live with the bass guitar. And the bass got me into lots of bands in England. And so I didn't have to do a job. I left art college and I was playing with funk bands in England. And then doing that, I realized that we weren't going to be successful unless we had songs. However we looked and however well we played other people's songs, songs were important. And then I sort of focused on early 80s becoming a songwriter and studying what it would mean to be a songwriter, because just being a bass player in a band is wonderful, but really I wanted to go farther than that. And to me, the way through was understand how to write a song. That's going to be the calling card to everybody.
Now, you said you studied how to be a songwriter. Like I did stand-up comedy for a long time, and I do it now occasionally. I don't. I do it for fun now. I did it for his job, and for me, I couldn't learn how to write a joke. Something pops in my head, like you say. I'll wake up. It's very hot here, so I'll write something stupid on Facebook. But I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought, oh, this is funny. I put it on my phone, and I go back to sleep. But you said you studied. How does one study to become a songwriter? Because I would think, I'm always fascinated because, with jokes, you just write them. There's not much. Even if you do a story, you just write it. But for music, you have lyrics, you have music, and it's just not straight through music. It's people add little hooks and stuff. So how did you study to become a songwriter?
It was all self-taught from listening to records. I've still got it in my loft now, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of vinyl records. That was all I cared about, buying a 45 record every week. And so it was my ears. I loved picking up a vinyl record and seeing in brackets the songwriters' names. I thought, who makes this magic? Where does this magic come from on this little vinyl 45? And so it was my ears. I would just keep on listening to records, and that's how I learned bass. And then the second thing from that was to listen to great songwriters. Again, we mentioned, listening to Elton. I was also, a huge fan of most of the great bands at that time, right from, as we said, Earth, Wind and Fire, Journey. You could go to Bob Dylan. You could go to everything. I was in, I had every kind, even Jimmy Cliff reggae. And so I was living with this, and then I would emulate it. I would emulate records. Of course, when you put the bass to one side, you go to the piano. And so there was a period of me studying how to play chords on the piano, because I thought, I've got to harmonically, I know how to play a bass and I know the scales, but now I need to be able to get around the piano, a bit like Phil Collins would, or Peter Gabriel, or Sting. You just want to get that sense of what is behind all this. But it was records. I never went to college. I was never given any lessons. It was emulating records that I had in my collection. I was a home tool all the way through. My mother was musical in the sense that she loved records, and she loved the big bands, and she loved Jimmy Dorsey and Frank Sinatra. But my dad, as you say, my dad was a pure technician. And what I took from my dad was hard work and understanding how to run a studio and run tape machines. I think I got that from my dad. But from my mum, I got all the rhythm and all the groove. But I was never taught, And again, when you write with somebody like Jack Hughes, who went to the Royal College of Music, you learn, And then when Bernie sends me a lyric, I'm sat there looking at an incredible lyric, and so you can't help but absorb that. Just to not make this too long, but I was lucky when I was in LA. There was a pyramid of great teachers I had, which was Maurice White, Earth, Wind and Fire, Robbie Robertson, I did his 2 solo records, and Bernie Taupin. So I had this pyramid of, great lyrics, great traditional Robbie Robertson, the band, spiritual music, and then you've got Bernie Taupin, who comes to you from visuals and lyrics. So I had that pyramid of great teaching. So you can't help but get better when you start hanging around people that are better than you, and I've done it before. But I was totally self-taught.
Now, Q-Feel, you had a writing partner. Now, how did you end up getting your solo album? Because it's always, I wonder, I always think when people write together, or if it's a band, and when someone goes to do their solo career, I think you lose a little bit of something. Because you've been with this guy for a while, you're partners, and that's your identity. You came to LA together, so your identity is, you too. And then all of a sudden you go for a solo career, and I think sometimes you must feel a little bit lost. How did you do the transition? What happened? And your first album is great. So what was the transition, and what happened?
Well, he's Scottish, and so I just had to dump him. You know what I mean? It's like, I didn't realise, but then one day I realised he'd come from Glasgow. I thought, that's it, leave. The door's down there, No, Brian wasn't sure he wanted to stay in America. So he was going back and forwards, and I was staying in LA, and I was going to work. So Brian wasn't sure this was the place for him. And I was working with when he wasn't with me, I was working with other artists. Now, my first R&B hit was with Earth, Wind and Fire on my own. I wrote a song called Magnetic when he wasn't here. So it was like I was going to stay, and I was going to stay focused. Brian was going to get married, he was going to have kids, and he was going to go back to Europe. My parents were in America, his parents were in Europe. So we fragmented. We got off of Jive Records because it was an unfair deal. What's wonderful is I'm writing with Brian and Trevor from Q-Feel now, and we've just about to finish a record together now. Not under the Q-Feel banner. It's a different kind of record, but we're together here, working again. But Brian sort of understood that I was going to never give up. I was never going to get sidelined. I was an addict. And of course, when he was away from me again, and I had rebuilt the city to become a number one, so he sort of came back to America. He settled here eventually, but it was like these things were happening for me around the edges because I just never stopped. And when Q-Feel disbanded, when we left Jive, we didn't see ourselves as a band. We thought we've got to concentrate on our songwriting. We both realized that Q-Feel was no more. So the band stopped. He went back to Europe. I carried on. And luckily, when I carried on, I had the hits with Bernie. So it sort of happened when his life was going in a different direction. He fell in love. He wanted to get married and have kids. And all I was caring about was having a 24-track tape machine in my house. So our journeys were different. When he said he was getting married, I was like, oh, no way. It was like, your career is over. So I was so blind. I was just one vision, He was right what he did. It was just that I was one thing, that's all I saw. It's only really now in my later years that I realized I was I was a machine. I was in the, and I was, as you said about LA, you bring this to memory to me, is that I felt like I'd gone to heaven when I reached LA. I was in the studios with Steve Lukather. I was in the studios with Tom Jones. I was in the studio with the Commodores. It was like, this is what I wanted to always do. So, and I think for Brian, he was more sensible in a certain way. He sort of saw himself saying, that's not everything for me. I only had to be in the studio with Earth, Wind and Fire and say, you know, I could die now. This is where I want to be. You know, this is it. This is it. But for Brian, life was going to be multi-dimensional. So I was dimensional. Yeah.
So how did you start your solo career? Because you're doing great as a songwriter.
Yeah.
So it's like something.
Yeah, that's a good question. It was because I was working with Bernie Taupin, the same guy who put me with Bernie, Bob Scoro, had heard some of the demos I was writing with Bernie, and he said, one day, but you're going to make a solo record, and I'm going to help you do that. And I was like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, you know. And then one day I walked into his office and I played him a few songs, House of Stone and Light, Light in Your Heart, Shape the Invisible, and I sort of said, you said one day you would make a solo record. I'm sure he was like, oh no, I didn't really mean it. And he just got a job at Mercury Records, and he believed in me. And he said, I'm going to sign you with Ed Eckstein, and we're going to do a record. And funny enough, when you think about all my career, all my music, from Q-Phil, you wouldn't think that Dancing in Heaven would be We Built the City. And you wouldn't think In the House of Stone and Light, my first record, would relate to We Built the City. So I was very much a chameleon. And at that point in the 90s, when I made In the House of Stone and Light, I'd just been working with Robbie Robertson. So it was the era of Hoochie and the Blowfish, Melissa Manchester, Melissa Etheridge, REM. Bands were playing again. It wasn't so much synthesizers. It was like organic music. People were playing their instruments again. And, you know, again, House of Stone and Light became a big hit. For 2 years, it was a successful record. But that came out of my relationship with Bob Scoro, who put me with Bernie Taupin. And he made a commitment to me. He said, one day you'll make a solo record. And I knocked on his door one day and said, I'm ready. And he had just moved to Mercury Records. So I signed to Mercury Records and made that solo record. And they left me alone. I could do the kind of record I wanted to. And on my new record, First and Last Freedom, this is where these two records meet up, because the musicians that were on In the House of Stone and Light are on my new record, The First and Last Freedom. That's why I was bringing back Jimmy Copley to play drums. I was bringing the band back together. So from that first album, Jack Hughes, Neil Taylor, PJ Moore from the Blue Nile, Bill Dillon in Canada, the guitarist, all these musicians had played on In the House of Stone and Light. And that pushed me on, because I thought, I'm bringing the band back together. We're going to do something special. And I believe that the new album, The First and Last Freedom, is a kindred spirit and is locked in its emotional place, mainly because of the players and because of the spirit it was written under. In the House of Stone and Light was written about redemption. I had to heal myself. I had to get out of LA and become healthy again. And First and Last Freedom was, you know, trying to get Jimmy healthy and bring him over. With these musicians, their contributions made the two records to me sound linked, which was a great feeling.
Now, you've written for so many different artists. I have your sheet here. I mean, just your Groban, all these different people. So, but then you talked about just your first album and your latest album. Do you put yourself in a different mind frame when you write for yourself and you write for someone else? Because I would think, as you said, redemption. You know, this one about your friend trying to get him to, get him back up. So it's more personal. Okay, there's things that are personal. So do you separate that? Like, how do you sit there? Like, as I said, We Built this City. You worked, so many different bands. I mean, I'm just looking at, there's so many people. How do you differentiate? Like, how do you sit there and go from writing something very personal that means something to you, that's hard to write? Because I know I've talked to a lot of musicians. It's hard. I talked to Gino Bonelli, and he wrote a whole album about his wife passing. So it's very personal. So how do you put the switch on and off? Because you're going from this is a Martin song to this is a Josh Groban song. Yeah.
I do switch off. I mean, I do switch off and go into different territories. As I said, I'm a bit of a chameleon. It's like I need to be changing my color here. Again, it comes right back to the roots of having such a huge record collection when I was young. My records were my friends. I was very isolated and into those records. So if you put me with Go West, I'd have known how Go West are. If you put me with Earth, Wind and Fire, I had all their albums. Williams. If you put me with Josh Groban, I'd have understood where he sings from. So it was also, I produced a lot of acts as well. So I think it was understanding from having a huge record collection that I was versatile. I was you could in a sports team that they said you can play up front or play them at the back. But I do switch off. And then by working on Robbie Robertson's first solo record and writing Fallen Angel with him that took a year at the Village in LA, I'd moved from just being a pop writer into the Daniel Lanois, U2, Peter Gabriel territory of artistic writing. We're not necessarily writing for a hit, we're writing for a progressive emotion. And Robbie, I learned a lot from Robbie, because it was like we have to write songs that either make us cry, make us laugh, or move us. And we will go on as long as it takes until we get Fallen Angel or The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. So I was in a different landscape, which I wanted to be in, because I was being known as the 10-minute pop wonder. Come to Martin's house and he'll give you, here's your hit, off you go. And I knew there was more to me. And after doing the Robbie record and working with Bernie, I decided that I wanted to make In the House of Stone and Light and tell my story. People used to tell me I was singing. My demos were I sang for other people to do the songs. But Robbie would say, you got a great voice. Why aren't you singing? Maurice White would say, you've got a thing about your voice. You've got emotion in your voice. Go and do it. So they were giving me confidence. And particularly now, I think I'm singing on the first and last Freedom better than I've ever sung before. You lose your octaves as you get older, but you get something deeper and more resonant in the way you express your side. Some of the songs I've written for myself get cut. Robbie Williams cut the long walk home from In the Temple of the Muse, and Me Morena cut. That was on my Temple of the Muse album, and Josh Groban heard that and wanted to cut it. And Starship have cut a couple of my songs from my solo records. So I think when I write for myself, other people could cut the songs, but I'm primarily thinking, what can I sing myself and pull off and be believable, and be lost in it. And I think that, to sum that up, it's like I was thrown into the studios with Robbie Robertson for 2 years, and they were making a very deep record, his first solo record, and I thought, this is the experience I need. So I put a studio in the garage. He had the studio in the Village, a small room. So I did the same. And he played guitar on it, and he kept on encouraging me. And of course, Bernie said, about time you made your own record. It's like, we like the way you sing, get out there and do it. So you get encouragement. And then you've had the hits. And so you want to sing something that is very emotional to you, real, it is your story. And on the new album, there's many songs on there that are really written about trying to help my friends. I couldn't give a fuck if it was a hit single. It's lovely, but I was trying to write the songs to motivate the musicians. I wanted my friends in and go like, this is a great song. I can't wait to play guitar on this. You're doing a good thing, Pagey. So in that sense, I've got a lot of freedom. I suppose the type of freedom, I've got a lot of freedom in thinking, I believe in this. I'm not writing it for somebody else in it and them not liking it or wanting to record it. It is true when I was young, before Go West came to see me, I'd already written the groove for King of Wishful Thinking. So I was thinking hits, 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 get the chorus first. I don't necessarily write that way now. It's, am I getting something from in here? And can I portray it?
No, you said you think hits. You thought hits earlier, but as you said, your first solo album was you writing for you. So how has your writing changed for you, not for other people? How has your writing changed for you? Because your first album was a long time ago. You've grown as a person. You've seen different things. You've had success. You probably had some heartbreak. We all go through shit. So how has you, like, when you look at now and when you look at your first solo album, how have you grown as a songwriter? Or have you feel like you've been the same? You've just always been writing great stuff?
I've always been writing great stuff. Everything. When you turn this off, I'm going to write another great song. No, I think I'm very lucky. I feel my consistency's been good. I do feel that. I've known a lot of writers that I started off with that aren't doing it anymore, aren't interested anymore. I'm still incredibly curious, just like Jack Hughes. You know, when we get together, when he comes into town, we're both fanatics for still going on, like a good blues performer. When should it stop? You know, you'll know when you want to stop. I feel I'm consistent. I feel on this new record, and of course, everybody who writes the new record, they go, "This is the best thing I've ever done." Well, I don't know if it's the best thing I've ever done. I just believe it's one of the most powerful emotionally and consistent. I think it links up to In the House of Stone and Light. I've done 11 solo records, and I believe there's a consistency there. But not all of them have been with live musicians. This one has the same musicians as In the House of Stone and Light, and they pushed me. You know, you're with a live drummer, you're with a horn section, you're with a Zulu choir from South Africa. So I was pushed. I had to make this good, and I was writing songs for Jimmy Copley to play drums on. I mean, this is a phenomenal drummer. So I was pushed to do something that needed to be done really, really well. I don't think I'm not being consistent. I think sometimes you make mistakes on albums. And a lot of my albums have been like a Todd Rundgren record where I'm playing every instrument. And then when you have players around you, you go like, oh my God, something else has happened. I'm being pushed here. It's great to hear a snare beat behind a real player behind my singing. But, and it's going to sound big-headed and ego, but I just think that I'm probably writing more meaningful stuff now than I've ever done before. I'm motivated by my reading. I never used to read as a kid. I'm reading, you know, a lot now. And so I'm very much into the alchemy and the positive sides of the occult and the mysterious, creativity. I'm very much into history. So I think some of my songs lyrically are leaning back on a deeper source. That's how I feel. And I'm quite excited. What next is going to come? Even though as you get to our age, you go like, I wonder if you'll be able to finish it. You know, you might have to have blood work done like you. I mean, you never know. You never know, Steve, you know. I mean, you never know what the results are going to be. You know, like, how the hell with this blood report did he do all these shows and write all these songs? So it's different, but I think I'm seasoned and I think I'm experienced and my voice is still there. That's very useful.
Okay, I have one final question. I always ask my guests this. You've had a great career. You know, you've had successful albums as a solo artist. You've done, 11 solo albums. It's a lot. You know, you look at your list of people you've written with. You've written across the board. Great people, you know, maybe some unknowns, but you've been, people came to you. So give me a few things that when you look back that you're very proud of. You know, people always, sometimes they're proud of their family. Or just give me a few things that when you look back at your career, and personal, you can do personal too, that's some things you're very proud of.
I mean, it's a hell of a question. I'm proud that I've kept, that the relationships I had with everybody was always positive. There was no animosity. Everybody I felt like I worked with left with good spirit and were encouraged. So I think that's the greatest thing for me is when I came in contact with Maurice White, working with him with Earth, Wind and Fire, it was wonderful to see a person who brought light into rooms and enthusiasm and spirit. And I believe I'm very, very proud that a lot of the people I worked with are still my friends. And the process was based on lifting the spirit more than dragging it down into business or we've got to do this, we've got to achieve that. I feel very proud of that everybody who worked with me and came through these rooms and everything, we made friends. And if we didn't get the right result, it was still done for the right reason. So I'm very, very proud of that. I think I was incredibly lucky that when I hit LA and I could have been, meet with the wrong people and drugs could have been involved. I always remember Maurice White saying, to me and Brian, if you guys don't get wrapped up in alcohol or drugs, your enthusiasm and your creativity is going to soar. And we took that to heart. So I feel very, very proud that everybody I've worked with, it came away saying, that was good fun. That was great. We tried our best and we did it for the right reasons. I think I'd hate to be sat here, Steve, and go like, that didn't work. I hate that manager. I hate that record. I mean, I hate that producer, that wouldn't have worked for me. I had to always feel like, well, I learned something from this, and there was a lot of. It sounds corny, but to me, it's like there was a lot of light in the studio and a lot of atmosphere of trying to do the best work we ever could. You know, I still feel like in those days I felt like a kid. I felt I'd been let into a very special playpen with some incredibly creative people, and they left people like Maurice. Robbie Robertson. They left great soul with you. They left it with you, and I hope and I feel proud that I think I've done that with many of the people I've worked with.
Well, this has been awesome, Martin. I'm so glad Diane reached out. It's been too long, and the first and last freedom. So where is the best place for people to get this?
Bandcamp. We made a CD with this. We went all the way. We thought, well, it's not just a streaming record. We made a 24-page booklet so we could do an essay on the story of this with Jimmy Copley and all pictures of all the players getting involved. So we're at Bandcamp. We just joined there. 2 of my albums are on there. The rest of my records are going to go on there because we want my records to be released on CDs. You find me on Facebook. Got a lovely lady that helps me. Been helping me for many years, Vanessa Levitt. So anybody who writes to me on Facebook, I write back. I get it. Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. I'm very, very busy on Facebook. But if you go to Bandcamp, you'll hear the tracks. You'll be able to get a download, and you'll hear the whole album for 3 times without anybody sort of committing. Bandcamp's like Tower Records again. So, yeah, go along and hear the tracks there. And we're building another website now. So, and Vanessa's helping us with that. But Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. Our pro site is nearly up. You can still go to it now. We've got new videos up for the new record. But Bandcamp's the place to go.
So people, please go check out Martin. Go listen to the record. And if you're getting a medical procedure done, it's going to soothe you, like I did this morning. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 1,040 episodes up there. If you're around this Saturday, the 28th, is it the 28th or the 29th? Whatever this Saturday is, June 28th or 29th. Or is it? Yeah, it's 28th or 29th. If you're out in the Philadelphia area, I'll be headlining Pizzeria Uno's Dave Evans Comedy Night. I'll be doing a nice 40 to 45-minute set. It's at Pizzeria Uno in Newtown Square. And don't forget, if you're on YouTube, look up The Coop Tank. That's my weekly business podcast. I talk with some shakers and movers of the business world. I host a panel discussion. And Coop's Comedy Corner is my other show. And if you go to coopscomedycorner.com, you can find swag, T-shirts, bottles, dog sweaters. I mean, there's a bunch of shit up there for all my shows. The Coop Tank, Cooper Talk, and Coop's Comedy Corner. Anyway, please go check out Martin's new record and his old records and listen to it. When you hear We Built This City, you'll go, oh my God, he was just talking to Steve. And I want to thank you. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.